Welcome back to another installment of the Hazing of the Noobs from our gracious leader, Falcon over there. I'll be the Director of Defense talking about emergency rooms. Fun, right? Okay, when you go to the emergency room, you guys expect that they're going to do everything they can to help you, right? Fix you up. You don't want to sit there and fill out paperwork and wait for other people to get done or wait for them to finish lunch. Yeah, it's for emergencies. To explain my reason, I'm going to go back on one of my instances with one. And it's kind of funny, it's kind of not, so I'll have to go to the beginning. So it starts out, me and my puppy, his name's Bear, he's pretty big now though. It's not puppy. Ever since we were little, we always played like a scare thing, we'd scare each other. So I decided one day, let's do it. So he's with the other dog, we're at a bonfire at my house, I sneak up on him and I scare him. He turns around and I get a face full of dog. And I'm on the ground, like, and then, like, I'm bleeding and stuff, and I knew what was going on, so I shove my hand in there, and I take the dog off, and I put holes in my hand. But anyway, I'm laying there laughing, covered in blood, by the way, and my mom's, like, kicking the dog over there, and I'm just laughing. I stand up, and she's like, okay, we're going to the emergency room. So we freak out, well, she freaks out. I drive off, and she's going, she drives off, and she's going crazy. Got mixed up there for a second. So we get to the emergency room. We go through the big old doors, and I expect, someone to come up and take me straight back. Nah, instead they took me around to the clinic, sat me down, and I had to fill out paperwork. I mean, that stack was like that big. It's like insurance card and stuff, and you're like, can I have some napkins for my face? And no joke, the paperwork, you could barely read my signatures and stuff. The floor, there was a puddle. There was a great big puddle there. And I'm just laughing. My mom's freaking out, yelling at the nurses why they ain't doing stuff, and I have to fill out paperwork. Still don't know why we had to do it, because once we got done, they're like, yeah, we actually didn't need that until the end. You could have filled that at the end, and they're like, okay. So finally I get back in there, and nurse takes me back, and she just looks at me. She's like, so what happened? I'm like, the dog bit me in the face. She's like, oh yeah, it looks like right here next to your eye. Oh, you could have lost your eye. Oh, what's this on your neck? It's next to your jugular. Oh, you could have bled out. And I'm like, I was filling out paperwork in the room, and I could have bled out and died. Great start to the day. So he's like, yeah, okay, I'll be back in a couple minutes to get with the doctor. A couple minutes is never a couple minutes. It's like 10, 20 minutes later, doctor comes in, knocks on the door, all polite, like, I'm doing something in there. It's like, I'm sitting here bleeding. It's like, I'm not trying to hide stuff, just come on in. No. So he gets in here, he looks it over, and he's like, okay, we have dog bites before. I've done this many of times. We have the suction cup thing, we put it all over the holes, and we suck out the bite because it could have bacteria and stuff in it, and then we shoot some resin and stuff in there to clean it. I'm like, okay, let's get this thing. It goes over here, gets all of these ones on my face. It's like, oh, this one under your eye, that's going to be tricky because it's a suction cup. It sucks out and shoots water in at the same time. So it's like, I've never done it on the eye, but we'll try it. I'm like, a suction cup on the eye? Sounds good. Puts on there, and I'm just feeling my eye, feel like it's going to pop. Like, oh. And I'm like, nah, we're done with that. So he's like, okay, but we have to get the stuff out. So he goes over, turns off the lights, brings in this giant bright lamp, puts it on my face, brings in this droplet, iodine droplets or something that they put in to clean the bacteria. Stuff sensitive light, so I had to have all lights out. Now, the whole time the guy's working on it, he can't see what he's doing, so he takes the light, puts it over the iodine stuff in this brown bottle. It's just focusing right on the liquid that's supposed to be light sensitive. That's why the lights are off. And he's working there, and he's like, okay, and I'm just looking like, that's right over the stuff that he said, like, okay. So it's still dark, he decides not to turn the lights on, takes the droplets, and he has to drop it in the hole right next to my eye. And it's dark in there, and he's like, I got this. Oops, I missed. And I'm like, yeah, I can feel it, because the stuff is, it can irritate your skin, and like the poison control stuff says, if you get in your eyes or swallow stuff, it could cause you to go blind. It could be poisonous if you eat it. It's like, oh, great. So then here comes the suction thing again, because now we have to get that stuff out of my eye before it's too late. So he flushes it with water, puts that thing on all over again. And he's like, okay, it's all clean, everything's all dandy. So he goes to get a suture kit. Comes in, he's like, okay, one on your neck, it's close to your jugular, I won't put stitches in that. Because it's close. I could nick something and bye. So he's like, we'll just patch that up, put a thing around my neck. I was all good for that. And he's working on all the other ones, The ones in my hands, I guess he didn't need to put them in. He just put a bandage over. And the one under my eye is like, okay, we've never done this before. It's like right in my eyelid, like no joke. Right in that little film right there. He's trying to sew that shut. It's like, don't move because I've never done it on an eye before. We're going to sew it shut. Let's go. And he's like, I could hit your eye. I could not. If you do, tell me. I'm like, oh, I'll tell you. And so here comes the needle. He's sewing it up, doing good and stuff. And then he finishes up, and I'm like, good. Nothing bad went wrong. Pretty good. Good. It's just good. And then all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and this older guy comes in. I guess he was like a higher up in the medicine thing on him or something. And so he asked him to go outside and talk with him. Kind of like what Meyer does here. Like, hey. And right there at that point, I'm like, oh, good. He's out there, and they think the doors are soundproof. Those doors aren't soundproof in the hospital. You hear everything. They're having a conversation about how, one, you shouldn't put the suction thing on the eye, and it says that on the thing, like plastic somewhere, I guess, because it could destroy your iris or something like that. Second off, he's like, you put stitches in the kid's eye. He looks that way, it scratches his eye, he's blind. I'm just like, yeah, and then the last one, he's like, and you better tell that kid not to sneeze. What happens is he's going to sneeze? It's going to just shred that thing. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So he comes back in, he does the whole, oh yeah, we're just talking about, paperwork and stuff. It's okay. It's like, you're good. And since we're done here and everything, just, if you sneeze, kind of just go, and I'm like, what? He's like, don't like force it out, just kind of like open your mouth and just like go out like, I'm looking, I'm like, okay. Because I heard that story later, I'm thinking, should have had this guy here before this guy. Like, the older guy come in and do it, not you. Anyway, and he's explaining the stuff of how I have to take care of it and all that. And then I have to come back and they have to cut it out. So I'm like, okay. So that's the end of that part. And I was all happy. I was like, yay, I get to go home. Just don't go sneeze. Just go, ahoo. We'll be good. And so we fill out more paperwork, the rest of that sheet or something we had. And as we're leaving, oh wait, nope, cut that. There was a part when they were doing the suction cup eye, there was a nurse in there and everything. She was new, there was like one of the students from here or something that helps out there or something. And she's over here, doing stuff, leans over to get the gauze on this side and she's on this side. She comes back and goes, right in the side of the face. Good old Evelyn. And then, so back to when we're leaving. We're leaving and everything. It's great. It's dandy. I had fun, I guess. The emergency rooms, I didn't think they should have paperwork in them. That's horrible. That's completely horrible. Could have died. Like, yeah, it's next to each other. You're going to bleed out.
Good.
Do I put that in this too? There's my name. And, yeah, so we leave. I'm sitting there talking to my mom. She was in the bathroom the whole time they were out there talking. I was like, no one was in there to back me up. So, Mom gets back, and I'm in the vehicle, and just as it happens, like, don't sneeze, thinking about it too much. I'm gonna sneeze. And I'm like, Mom looks over like, what was that? And I'm like, good. And then, because you don't have that force behind it, you have to keep sneezing, to get it out. You're like, She's looking at you like, why don't you just sneeze? And I'm like, I can't, doctor. And I explained the whole thing to her. She's like, oh, okay. So the rest of the way home, I'm just like, stop sneezing. And I get home, she puts it in park, and I'm like, and I'm like, and she just looks over like, you okay? We have to go back? We will go back. I'm like, no going back. No. My eye's gone, it's gone. And luckily it didn't, but it like split my eyelid open or something, like split that where that was, the thing. And the whole time I had those in, if I moved my eye, I could feel it. It just like grazing against the bottom of it, and I was laughing. I was like, yeah. I had pictures and stuff, they're pretty cool. And my dog, they wanted to put him down, but I kept him. I was like, nah, he's my dog. It was an accident. It was because the other one was in heat, that's why he attacked. Big old long story. But anyway, I think emergency rooms should be for emergencies. You should not have to go in there and, like, say you lost both arms. Fill out the paperwork, please. How? No, you should, if you have to do paperwork, do it at the end. Don't do it in first. And make sure you have people in there that know what they're doing. Because like I said, it took like 20 minutes for the doctor to see me. After the nurse said, oh yeah, you could have bled out there. I'm like, still alive, safe. So moral of the story, make sure you get a good doctor and make sure the emergency rooms are top notch.